This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Stay tuned for further instructions. This is not a test.
All right. Welcome to the podcast. Today I'm joined by Phil Yanoff, Bill Bensing, and Shashi Shramali. I thought today we might have an interesting conversation about something that I've been seeing a lot on LinkedIn and other places, people talking about design thinking, right? And various interpretations of what that is or what it isn't or what it ought to be. So I thought we could just have a quick roundtable discussion, given our diverse backgrounds, right? We might each have an interesting take on what design thinking is. So, Bill, I know you've done a lot of sort of like rapid prototyping. You're in the thick of everything, coding. You coding your own cloud platform, or you're doing something crazy, right? So, you know, what is design thinking? What does it mean? What is it?
To me, I mean, you think what design thinking is, fundamentally, it's analysis versus synthesis. So you think about how we approach problem solving, and this really comes about, what was that book? I think it was like The Opposable Mind no, that was Roger Martin, different book. Anyways, but to me, design thinking is about so synthesis, taking things that don't exist yet, or may not exist, and putting together into some type of output that meets a need that you're going after, as opposed to something like analysis, where you're going through and sort of analyzing a problem and looking at its underlying components to understand what's going on there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, you know, Shashi, I know you're like day-to-day working with clients. I mean, you're in big corporate America doing important things, right? So like with what Bill just said, is that how, or are they even thinking about design thinking at where you're working and the clients that you engage with?
So, I mean, absolutely. So everybody wants to, think like a designer. It's as simple as that, as simple as it sounds. You think like a designer. And if you go back to the fundamentals of the designer, let's say an interior designer who would have done up your beautiful house, which I can see in your backdrop, they would think, how would you use it? How would it look like? Right? These are the fundamental things. When we are building software systems or we are building products and services for a company, companies don't think about that. It's as simple as that. When you are designing your product and services, you think about your consumers or think about your clients, how they are going to consume your service, which helps you identify the problem and eventually helps you design a solution which will have much higher adoption. And then second thing is, your chances of success is extremely high. Everybody is thinking about it, but what it takes to make this successful in large corporate America, people, probably some of the smarter people understand it, but it's extremely difficult for them to do anything about it. I think they think about it, but they are not able to do anything about it at this point in time.
That's interesting. So like one of the smartest people I know is Phil Yanoff. And I know Phil is certified in design thinking. Do you have your certificate?
Oh, I don't have my certificate. I was just, I'm sorry. We're in the middle of this already. I was reading right here. Oh, just sorry. You caught me during my morning devotional.
Yeah, excellent. But by the way, that's my book, The People Problem by Chris Lockhart, available on Amazon.com.
Yeah, I've been through a couple of classes in the design thinking, and we're lucky here. The Design Thinkers Academy is based in my hometown, and so has a chance to talk to those cats and actually use design thinking and learn about it. And I think everyone here has kind of talked about the stuff side of it. The thing I really like about design thinking is it talks about the people side of it, right? And that is kind of where Shashi was headed with it. But I think about it even more, which is what is the emotional state and what are the people trying to get done who are interacting with my product or service, and how am I transforming them as they go through the process? So, I think it's it is a great framework. And one of the things I like about it, particularly for the software design side and service design side, is it is asking people to, before you go and design the product or service, or before you design its next iteration, go out and talk to the customer and do some real actual research.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, because when I see it in practice, when I hear people talking about design thinking, it's almost as like some sort of cosmic, some knowledge given to us by the gods or something that is going to fundamentally alter how we do everything. I guess the question is, this is for anybody, right? Is, how is it fundamentally different than just like doing shit good, right? In terms of knowing who your customer is and developing things that they would be interested. Like, why should a business care? Why does design thinking matter fundamentally to a company if they're good at what they do, just fundamentally?
I think it's an very interesting point. I feel it's not fundamentally different. What businesses are trying to do, or especially I would blame consulting companies for doing that, it's trying to convert this form of art into science. So this is have this beautiful process of design thinking. I think like they stop like wrong people in order to solve that problem. You got to think like designer, and I don't think everybody has the capability to think like designers. It's like an inherent, perspective which truly designers bring to the table. So if you have a technologist, you essentially might end up, the great technologist, but at the same time, he might be a terrible design thinker. They can take that as an input when you are talking to a customer and then design your product accordingly. But I think in my mind, two fundamentally different skills. It's not fundamentally different. And third thing is they're trying to convert art to science.
I want to agree and disagree with you at the same time.
Excellent.
So I want to disagree because I don't think companies in general are doing design thinking. I think people use the words, it's like the faux innovation. When everybody says we're innovating, they're not really innovating. But I also at the same point in time want to agree with you that some people can't think about how to do it. And I go back to like your traditional business schools and whatnot, and sort of you think about where design thinking and thinking about the customer centricity comes from. In a business hire analysts. They don't hire designers. Our traditional way we look at business and how we approach it is not to we want to say we want to understand the customer, but I think when you peel back the layers, nobody's really want to understand the customer. People want to drive a bottom line. And that's really a huge difference in how we approach it. So that's why that's my assessment, my assertion, that why most businesses aren't doing it today. Now, there are some big businesses doing it really well. Look at your Googles, your Amazons, your Facebook. I think by nature, they design for an end customer. They're customer-centric. And then their finances, they see it. But most companies, small, medium-sized businesses, and probably unless you're an engineering design firm, you're not designing. You're faux designing or you're faux innovating because I just don't think they teach it. I go back to my MBA. When I was in my MBA, I was never taught how to design anything. And this was the big epiphany when I got into the startup world. My MBA was awesome for my established businesses, helped me understand what was going on there, analyze the business, come up with plans and processes and procedures to become more efficient and or find effectiveness in other areas. But it never taught me how to design something. You don't go through financial analysis. You don't go through supply chain analysis and say, okay, what new supply chain can I come up with? You ask, what can I do to make it more efficient or more effective?
Chris, I think one of the things that where Bill is headed that makes a lot of sense to me is that one of the reasons, particularly in that small to medium business space, one of the reasons we get into that space is we think we know the answer already. And that is one of the things that kind of keeps us from being good at design thinking, because we don't go and do the research. We don't ask all the questions we ought to ask, because a lot of times we think we got this worked out already.
I think you also raised a great point, right? One is being a customer-oriented company fundamentally, which Amazon, Facebook, and Googles of the world are. And second is the product-oriented company, which I think like IBM still is. Like, can they fundamentally change from being product-oriented company to a customer-oriented company? That's a huge transition, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? So, I mean, I guess, when I think about it, and, I can see the implication, right, for a company like this, we were talking about the small, medium sized company that maybe is more nimble to begin with and is able to adapt and change how they approach a problem, right, and apply a new methodology or a different methodology. What about like, Cigna or United Health Group or, a $100 billion company? What's the implication there of design thinking? Is there one, like, or does it take a different form? Is it, when we think about design thinking in a massive company like that, does it come down to sort of a different leadership style or a different way of work, as opposed to strictly, we're going to do design instead of, the other way? So I mean, I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I think it comes with different behaviors. So think about the behavior that drives a big healthcare company, right? And it goes back down to the bottom line behavior. Design thinking. Now, design thinking, the outcome is a better bit. You're more customer centric, which means you have better products, which i.e. means you provide more value and have a bigger bottom line. But I would argue that a lot of reason why is that behavior is not the future centric behavior like Amazon. I mean, look at what Jeff Bezos has fundamentally done to Wall Street. He's trained them not to worry about profits, but to worry about growth. Look at every other company in Wall Street, and they get hit for profits and not necessarily growth. And so I think it's that behavioral construct which really keeps us. And I mean, healthcare is ripe for, we'll call it the innovation, ripe for design thinking, redesigning the way that people think about healthcare and acquiring healthcare. But I always think that big companies is a behavioral mindset. And to your point about leadership, it's a fundamental change in how we view the leadership of our organization. The leaders view approaching executing their business and or discovering new business models. And it goes back probably to a little bit of Steve Blanc versus, what he talks about was a 4 steps to the epiphany, business model discovery and business model execution. Design thinking is really about discovery. Most businesses today aren't concerned about discovery, and I think that's the fundamental behavior, and that's why they get upset and fundamentally disrupted. And so if you change your mindset to more discovery and keep it on execution, but this whole, think about Kodak, execution to the utmost until we become irrelevant, that's fundamentally what happened at Kodak. Kodak could have been Instagram. Kodak could have been all of this stuff, but they decided to execute on what they knew as opposed to design their future. And so that's what mindset is. Go ahead, Shashi. Sorry.
I think you have a great point. I want to piggyback on what you said. So my thought about Kodak and similar company, Blockbuster and all, I don't think they did not know that it's not coming. The downfall is not coming. Sometimes what happens is you start off as a startup, right? You build a great product. Your company grows from being a 10-people company in a garage to being thousands of people, right? For this period of time, you had multiple leaders, and you inherently build an unorganized organization culture. Now, when you want to become more customer oriented, essentially what happens is start thinking about your processes, you start thinking about your systems. We keep on using the term, Chris, called legacy transformation. What they don't understand is they have legacy system, but they have legacy culture as well.
Yeah.
They never ever focus on changing or transforming their legacy culture. So that's exactly what happened. It's not that they did not want to change. I feel they could not change. They wanted to change. They could see it coming. They probably wanted to go digital. They were such a huge organization, making cultural changes, transforming upside down. It was probably not possible for them. That's what I think. Sometimes they want to change, they can't because it's such a complex organization. Not an easy.
I mean, in short, this is the innovator's dilemma, right? I mean, it is exactly it. How do I do that? That is the dilemma.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Phil, you deal a lot with people and getting them involved in the right spot in a company and connecting people together that have interesting ideas. I mean, do you see this in the companies you're dealing with or the folks that you're dealing with in terms of I need to think about things differently, or I have a legacy way of thinking about things and I'm in trouble?
Well, I think big companies have that. So if I'm inside or somehow connected to someone who's working in a project inside of something or in something big, it's really, really challenging to move a large company. But what happens sometimes is a department or a division or something like that, some subgroup decides they're going to make a bit of a change, right? And they're going to incorporate that. So I think, I don't know what it is, worldwide for Coca-Cola, but I know that their HR department decided they were going to use design thinking to handle how they brought people into the culture. And so that was a bit that could do that, right? But yeah, it's really easy. I mean, I don't know why this sort of came to me, but I was thinking about this as Bill and Shashi were talking about. I said, an oak tree cannot decide I'm going to be a strawberry bush tomorrow, right? It's just not going to happen.
Yes.
For good reason, right? Embedded culture is built to establish the longevity of the thing, and it can go until the purpose no longer exists. And that kind of what happened. You talk about Kodak. I just thought Fuji just announced that they're no longer going to make black and white film, right? They're just done with that. So that thing goes away. But if you also remember, Kodak's response at the time was APS, right? They came out with it. Instead of making the digital transformation, they came out with a different kind of film and said, let's make film easier.
Exactly. It's like an incremental versus disruptive. I'll share my experience around the culture, right? So, like probably a couple of years ago, I interviewed with a company. The company have MuleSoft, right? So that got acquired by Salesforce recently. I cleared like I interviewed with them for about 4 or 5 months, cleared 12 rounds of interviews. My offer was on the table. You know why I was not hired? Because the CEO of the company or the probably leadership of the company said that this guy has changed more than two companies in the last 5 years. That's against our culture. It's kind of some red flag. So that shows such a strong culture they are trying to build. I was very disappointed, but when I look in the hindsight, want to build a culture, they know what they're doing. So probably they decided. And I was the best fit they could ever find with the right mix of consulting and technical background, the kind of problem space they were in. I was the best candidate they could ever hire. They decided not to do that. I'm not being arrogant. I'm telling you the fact.
I know. I gave you a good reference. I said I felt really good.
You know it. Yes, you know it. So it was like shocking for me. But hey, you got to make some tough calls.
All right. So I mean, so we've talked about what it is, right, and sort of some of the implications in terms of technology and leadership and culture. I guess we've talked about a couple of companies. So I guess my question really is like, would design thinking, as we've talked about it, would it have saved Kodak? Would it have saved a Polaroid, or or even Blockbuster Video? Right. I mean, would that have helped them, or is it a lost cause? Is it the Titanic that can't turn around and avoid the iceberg?
I think what you said in the end is what I go with. They could have used design thinking probably to identify the problem and probably design the solution. But I think it was Titanic, and they probably could not change it. They wanted to, they could not change it. The best they could do is what Phil said: come up with a better film. When probably leadership was not bold enough to make those decisions. So I don't think design thinking would have helped them in any ways.
I'm going back and forth on this one with internally because I want to say yes and I want to say no. I get back to thinking, let's go back to the culture. So like Phil and Shashi were talking about culture. What makes me think about is, Conway's Law. Mel Conway, and it was in the 1954 deal he did on communications. When you think about a system, broadly speaking, is structured around how you communicate. And if you think about getting into design thinking, the way we communicate is not necessarily the communication structure for design thinking. But if you want to ask, if there's an implied question, there's like, how does somebody incorporate design thinking? It's think about how you communicate and what you talk about and how you talk. And this goes into, Chris, you and I have talked about this before. Gartner's got this concept of bimodal IT, right?
Oh.
Yeah, and for the longest IT, I don't know if this is, I don't know if
now they are saying that bimodal IT is dead. Somebody's saying
but here's
and killed it. That's great.
But here's the thing though. It's funny about that. Like just coming from a small mid-sized company. For the longest time, I literally thought bimodal IT was bullshit. Like that was, I thought it was. But I saw it as I started thinking about Mel Conway, the communication patterns. What does bimodal IT represent? Well, it represents a bifurcation of how you communicate in a company. Now you can be loosely coupled yet highly cohesive with this model. So if you set aside a second segment to go out and think about design thinking, because you get back to sort of what a business does, an established business executes a known value proposition. Well, design thinking is about understanding what's unknown right now. You can't approach design thinking with a pros and cons list. That's just, you can't take the best of the worst situation. So trying to wrap this back around into a solid point that I'm thinking about is if you go towards a design thinking into an organization, any company can do it. You just have to really understand. I mean, you think about your current culture, understand what's going on, how you communicate, and change the way you're communicating. And it comes back to design thinking itself. Let's go back to solving the problem. Really, you're designing the way that you're going to design in a new organization. Is that too meta right now? Does that make sense?
It does. I think you are absolutely spot on. It's basically, you are running a bicycle. You want one wheel to go in one direction, another wheel to go in another direction. That's not going to happen. That's what bimodal IT is. You decide the direction you want to go in, and you rally your troops accordingly. And I think what you are alluding to is if an organization wants to be design thinking, they cannot be doing design thinking for one product or one team. They got to transform their organization inside out and cultivate that habit of it, which requires, hey, if I'm going to fail, I rather fail fast. All of us have heard this term fail fast thing. I mean, this has to be embraced and supported by the leadership, and then the entire organization needs to change. It cannot happen for one project.
Bill, would design thinking have saved those companies? Would it have saved what we were talking earlier about defunct technologies? HIC OS.
It's kind of like, I mean, the question, I don't know the answer to that. Because I'm wondering, because sometimes we all know companies who know what the problem is, they just don't want to change, right? And that just happens sometimes. And so the question is, did they want to? Would they have? So they could have had a much better understanding of what was trying, or what people were trying to do. Would they have changed because of it? And I just don't know. That's a cultural issue. And that kind of brings us back to where we were at the beginning. Right. You know, can I bake this into my culture? Will I bake this into my culture, or won't I?
Yeah. So, all right. So to tie it all off, guys, it seems like a good place to sort of tie it off. I kind of want to, I'm going to force you to make a decision. You know, design thinking, silver bullet or bullshit, right? So, Bill, silver bullet or bullshit?
Can I talk about the spectrum, or do I have to pick one or the other?
I gotta choose.
I don't believe in silver bullets, and so this is I'm trying to. That's why I'm challenging you. I don't believe in silver bullets, but I definitely don't think it's bullshit. I think that it in and of itself is a culture, it's a meta model. That I think is proven. I mean, look at IDEO, look at a bunch of companies that implement it. They're different deals. It's proven it works. It's definitely worth a investment in any company to experiment if they're looking to develop a new product, a new set of products in a different way.
Shashi, what do you think?
I'm definitely, it's not a bullshit, but it's not a silver bullet either.
No.
So I think that I'll scale it more towards the silver bullet if we can get the culture aspect of it right. If we staff the right kind of skills, you do not take your technical folks or standard management consultant and say, hey, these guys are my design thinkers. These are not the people who can do that kind of work. You need highly specialized skills, and you need to address the culture. Then probably it gets more closer to silver bullet, but it's not a bullshit for sure.
Okay. Phil, what do you think?
You know, I think an organization that can be flexible, that it still prizes that more than anything else, this is a very powerful tool for them. You know, for me, this is a framework that I believe in and I practice, right? But I could see that if I were a really ossified organization, I might not be able to make the changes. I might not be able to adjust with it. So I'm probably not going to be able to use it as much. But I'm small, trying to be fleet of foot. For me, it's a very useful framework.
Excellent. Well, guys, listen, this was great. I love the conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. So I think we'll call it a day on that note. And thanks for watching, everybody, and hopefully see you next time.